Next up, we have an interview with Lee Valenta, the former director of WISE. How are you doing, Lee?
I'm great, Chuy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So Lee, I wanted to talk to you about the history of WISE and the beginning of WISE. How did it start?
How did it start? Well, in 19 mid 80s, 1980s, Tom Bellamy from the University of Oregon went to Washington, D.C. to work with Madam Madeline Will, who was the Secretary of Education at the time under Ronald Reagan. And Tom had had a lot of experience at the specialized training program in Eugene, working with people with pretty significant challenges to employment. And when he went to Washington D.C. as a Kennedy Fellow, and when he was there, he connected with Madeline Will, and as a result of that, he had a great deal of influence on what was going to happen with people, adults with developmental disabilities regarding employment. And at the time, possibilities, the resources for people with developmental disabilities were slim once you left high school. You ended up typically in a work activity center or a developmental center where work was either non-existent or it was kind of like make work. So there was really no future. And the whole idea, once you got there, the reality of it was you probably would never leave. And what they used to say that at the rate that people were going with the history of any progress in those centers, um, it would take you 70 years to get out of the center and get into employment. And so that wasn't happening for people. So what Tom and Madeline Will put together was the concept of supported employment. At the time, the words didn't exist. But the idea was rather than try to make people go through hurdles to reach a job in the community, why not put the people right into the job in the community and provide the support on site? So when they introduced supported employment, the idea was that the people who were going to be targeted for these jobs were going to be people with the most significant disabilities, that the jobs were going to be in the community, that they were going to be in integrated settings, and the people that were going to get these jobs and opportunities were people who actually needed ongoing support. The projects that got these grants were supposed to change the way states supported people once they were adults and tried to change the developmental centers and the activity centers to either create new work type of programs or change those programs so that people would have opportunities to learn to work, to actually
Mhm.
be supported in the community. So that's how the Washington Initiative for Supported Employment started.
How did you meet Jeff?
Jeff was a young wild man in the community, and he didn't have a job at the time. He was young, and he didn't have a job at the time. When supported employment started in the mid '80s, we also had in the state of Washington an employment conference. So we started it in 1978, and it was held at Ellensburg every year. And at the time, it was the largest and probably one of the few employment conferences in the country. And in this conference was promoting the ideas of people being employed in the community. A lot of us knew Jeff and knew that he wanted to work and probably could work with the right kind of support. And a friend of mine who worked at the Division of Developmental Disabilities, Joyce Duran, and I, and another friend, David Schlesinger, who ran an organization that supported people in the community, basically uh, we had this conversation at this Ellensburg conference and basically said, we're helping to find jobs for people all of a sudden in private sector employment. What about the public sector? If the Division of Developmental Disabilities is promoting jobs for people, what are they doing to hire people themselves? And so we knew Jeff. We knew he was a good job candidate, And Joyce pulled some strings and used influence within the state. And David Schlesinger at Eastside Employment Services at the time became the support organization. And Jeff got the opportunity to work for the state of Washington at the Division of Developmental Disabilities on Cherry Street in Seattle. Did I get that right, Jeff? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And the nice part of it is that Jeff was then able to earn a living working several hours a week at the division, and therefore he was able to then better support his preference for beer.
What are some things that you're doing right now that you're working on yourself?
Well, I'm not directly connected in any way to the developmental disabilities field. Most of as a result of retiring and over the last several years, I've been just hanging around my house and working in my garden and building things and have a new greenhouse. And I do mostly through Sess and several other people keep track of what's going on in the field. And if asked, give my opinion. Sometimes I give my opinion without being asked for what it's worth. But I enjoy. So yeah, right, Jeff.
I hear later on we're gonna do a fireside chat.
Yeah, what are we going to talk about?
Oh, there's plenty to talk about.
I look forward to seeing you later. Trish will be home.
So when you decided you wanted to talk to Trish and me again, what did you have in mind? What kinds of things were you interested in hearing from us?
I want to hear about Trillium. I heard it started from the trunk of a car.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is pretty cool.
Well, I'll tell the beginning part of it. I was working for the state of Washington, Division of Developmental Disabilities at the time. And every time I was in a meeting, people were always talking about how people like Mark Gold and Tom Bellamy and a lot of people were doing research all over the country to prove that people with the most significant disabilities could work, could produce things, complex tasks, etc. But the reality of it is that nobody who had that many challenges, those people were not getting jobs. We were finding jobs for people who were less disabled, which was great. But everyone thought that people with significant disabilities, the label that we used at the time, should be working. And I kept hearing it in meetings, and finally I said, I want to do something about it. So I quit my job. I went half-time. We approached several businesses, and nobody, some people were interested, but not that interested. Eventually we found a business that was quite interested, and it happened to be one of the businesses labeled 100 best companies in the United States to work for. His name was called Physio Control. And the production manager was quite interested, but he said we had to wait. And so we waited and approached him 6 months later, and they said, sure, let's start. And ultimately we had a small group of people working, helping to make heart defibrillators. It was a fairly simple concept, and we supported the people at Physio Control, and so in terms of record keeping and all of that stuff, it was a shoebox. We didn't have to have all of the typical kinds of things because we were new. And when I went to the county and they had to do evaluations of how we were doing and what we were doing, I would just bring them the shoebox and say, here's all the paperwork, and everything you need to know is right here. And that was in 1983.
Trish, where do you come in?
I had to put up with the shoe boxes or the boxes in my house. And Lee and I, we had worked together previously. So really this field and this career we were doing together. So after dinner or before dinner, we were always talking about what we were doing. And I had been working in a small sheltered workshop, which was a demonstration project out of the University of Oregon. Primarily what I was interested in is the training aspects of it and teaching complex skills to people and developing that way. And at some point, Lee wanted to leave this position, and he had the opportunity to go to Wise and be the first director there at Wise. And so I decided to leave where I was and come to Trillium. There were 3 of us, Terry and Chuck Goodwin and me, and we started looking at ways to replicate what we were doing at Physio Control and find other businesses who were interested in hiring several people with significant developmental disabilities. You know, it seemed like something that could grow. And then I think it was in 1989, the Boeing company had heard about what was happening at Physio Control, and they wanted to do a similar type of thing. But at that point, Lee felt, and I felt, that the people with disabilities shouldn't be working all in the same work area at the company. And we had already started to get Physio Control to move people to be integrated in other work lines at the company. But Boeing had wanted to do it with people being congregated, 8 people together in the wire shop in Renton. And so the first thing we had to do was talk Boeing out of doing that and really thinking of people working individually at Boeing. Trillium started to grow with that concept of individual employment.
Do you see a big difference now?
Because the individuals we were trying to find employment for were people who were, again, had way more challenges than most of the people who were working than all of the people who were working at the time. And so, as Trish has indicated, that those initial relationships that we had with businesses, Associated Grocers, the soap place, Physio Control, we started with a group of individuals because we felt it was easier to promote that concept with the business. We quickly realized that yes, that was a way to begin, but it's not a way that we wanted to replicate, on and on and on. So one of the big changes, certainly, was the quick shift to individual employment for Trillium. And of course now, over all these years, Trillium has been finding jobs for people, individual jobs for people. Because of the nature of the organization and Trish's leadership and the quality of the staff and their own successes have led the rest of the field.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to see that. I was in the office the first day I got here. People talk highly about both of you at the office.
Well,
and they mentioned the story about the trunk, and I'm like,
yeah,
pretty cool.
Trish was there. I was only there a couple of years to get things rolling and form those relationships, etc. But Trish took it from 1987.
I ended in 2015, the end of 2015.
And in those days, not only us, but a lot of other organizations, a lot of other people who were doing good things, we were so concerned and so afraid about losing the opportunity and not being proven to be reliable, etc., that we were actually doing the work, for the individuals, just so that we wouldn't, not lose the job. Of course, you fast forward to the last several years and today, and you're talking about approaching businesses and coworkers involved immediately, right off the bat. People are hired directly, etc. And what your job is you'll always be available to the organization, to the business, and to the person. But your job is to not necessarily be there all the time. So
the people were hired at Physio in 1983. And people in the state of Washington with developmental disabilities had only had the right to education since 1977. To me, what I've seen over the years is a huge difference in the skill level of people graduating. And no matter what the level of their developmental disability, very high skill level and academic skills.
So what would be your message to companies that are still out there that are afraid of hiring people like me who has an intellectual or developmental disability?
One obvious thing to tell, if you form a relationship with a company and they're somewhat interested, is you could arrange a meeting with other businesses. hired people with developmental disabilities, and even facilitate an open and honest conversation about, what are the benefits, what are some of the drawbacks. If you have the opportunity to help people understand that hiring an individual with a disability really doesn't have any more drawbacks at some level than hiring a person without a disability, so to speak.
The population sees people with developmental disabilities working in, grocery stores and things like that. But the danger is that they think that that's the only place that they can work. They don't see the performance of people who are working in offices or other types of businesses that they don't ever go to. So videos of those possibilities, I think, become really important, of showing that people with developmental disabilities are working everywhere.
In those days, early on, we were in charge. We did everything. We thought we needed to speak for people.
Would you say that the type of work that I do now would have been frowned upon back then?
Not at all.
No, not at all.
But we were so focused on just getting people jobs. And so we still have, the last 40 years, we're still focused on that. We're so focused on that we were always the one getting the people jobs, and, et cetera. The focus is on us. We were training each other, and we were telling each other how to do all this kind of stuff. And I think what's happened over the years is the growth, both us letting go, us encouraging, us supporting people to speak more loudly for themselves. As in, you're just taking all of that work from the last 40 years and you're sort of on the cutting edge of doing that even differently than it's been done before.
I'm going to switch the tables around. You got questions for me?
Yeah, one of the things I want to know is what you're looking forward to.
I want to be able to teach people how to do this type of work.
Mm-hmm.
So another person with an intellectual or developmental disability is able to see if they can do what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to take this time and say thank you to both of you for opening your doors, for letting us be here and interviewing.
You're always welcome, I know I'm going to see you again. Whenever you do come out to do some work with Chuck and Wise, you make sure you come here.
It was great to see you again.
Thanks for watching this video. Click like, share, and subscribe to show your support, and visit gowise.org to find a library of trainings and other self-advocate-led content in the Wise Learning Center.